The Warthog's engines roared, firing its pistons at full might as Spartan 117 pressed his armoured foot against the pedal. Explosions rang out from all around, vibrating the forerunner plates below them. The Halo's entire structure was collapsing beneath them after being activated by the Master Chief. It was an unoperational ring. The ring hadn't been fully constructed. Gaps and holes littered its landscape like artificial craters. It hadn't had enough time. Created to replace the original Halo that the Pillar of Autumn had discovered. But thankfully, it wouldn't be fulfilling its true purpose. Sergeant Avery Johnson had met up with Master Chief and the Arbiter at the Halo's control room, all with the plan to fight through the flood and activate the unstable Ringworld, killing what remained of the flood and hopefully destroying the Ark, preventing such a powerful galaxy-ending weapon from being wielded by another religious, genocidal maniac. He fired his Spartan laser at a large cluster of sentinels ahead of the Warthog's path. They vaporized, remains of their metal carapaces falling to the floor. The Warthog didn't slow, and the Master Chief drove straight over the remains. The path to activating the Proto-Halo was no easy feat, and it wasn't just the flood preventing them from achieving their goal. As they reached the main terminal, they bumped into the monitor, 343 Guilty Spark, or what the Arbiter used to call the Oracle. Its true purpose was to safeguard its own Halo and prevent outbreak or spread of the flood. But after its recent failure guarding its original ring, it had come here, overseeing its hasty construction set into motion by a safeguard protocol built into the Ark. In case of a Halo's destruction, the Ark would immediately begin creating a new one, replacing the Ringworld to refill the Halo array to maximum effectiveness. But early activation of an unfinished Halo would be catastrophic, a perfect way to neutralise the remaining Covenant and Flood in and around the Ark. The Master Chief was the one to activate the Halo, using Cortana and the original index from the previous Halo to activate it. But before they could, the Monitor wasn't willing to let that happen, and it attacked. 343 Guilty Spark struck the Master Chief in his back, killing his shields and scorching the outer layer of his Mjolnir, forcing him onto one knee.
Unacceptable! Unacceptable! Absolutely unacceptable! Protocol dictates action! I see now that helping you was wrong!
Johnson fires his Spartan laser, missing and only grazing the floating light bulb. The Arbiter followed suit, firing his carbine. The round seemed to do nothing, only seeming to ping off the Oracle, similar to the way light would reflect off of a mirror. The Monitor turned and began a ruthless barrage of hard-light rays, burning into the Arbiter's ornamental armour. He fell back, as if being hit by a truck, and landing on his right shoulder. It had taken some light damage, but not enough to cripple it in any way. The metal ball floated in front of Johnson.
You are a child of my makers, inheritor of all they left behind. You are Forerunner.
Its once calming blue light at its centre eyepiece changed into a menacing red.
But this ring is mine.
The Master Chief rose, his armour smoking, the Mjolnir's green paint peeling and falling to the floor. He charged, jumping onto its small frame from behind. The levitation technology built by the Forerunners struggled. Its light humming turned into a low, vibrating growl. The Monitor carapace wasn't built to carry such a substantial weight, and a Spartan in Mark 6 Mjolnir was far heavier than the more average human. A blue aura seemed to propel from the Monitor, forcing the Master Chief to fall back, sliding along the floor and towards the edge of the control room's bridge-like corridor. His hand broke the gravity wave, grabbing onto the edge and stopping his momentum that could have thrown him down the shaft below. Johnson flew back from the opposite way to the Master Chief. Being much lighter, he hit the door behind him with a thud. His head snapped back, banging into the impossibly hard metal. This was the one time he regretted not wearing a helmet. The Arbiter beside him ignited his energy sword. Blue light bathed and reflected his armour. He made a dash, attempting to slice for the Oracle. But he was met with the same fate, being forced backwards. Sliding on his feet, back next to Johnson at the door. With no other choice, he resorted to his carbine, firing with no real effect. The monitor let out another screeching burst of its red-hot, hard-light energy, knocking into the Arbiter once again. His shields had only just recovered, and immediately flashing blue as he was forced back into the door once more. That's when he fired. Johnson knew that nothing light was going to do any damage to Forerunner alloy. Only his Spartan laser would do the job. With the monitor being too distracted by the Arbiter's aggressive rushing tactics, it had no time to react from Johnson's very own personal laser beam. His Spartan laser had charged, scorching through the air at light speed and vaporizing a line of the Halo's oxygen-rich atmosphere. It made contact, and the monitor's carapace melted and crumbled. Its Forerunner machinery inside made popping noises as it shook violently. Screams and hums echoed out before a final pop, falling to the ground. The monitor was defeated, and finally out of their way for good. He took pride in himself. Folding the Spartan laser back over his back, he ran over to the edge where the Arbiter had been giving the Master Chief a hand. He was fine, and only his armour had absorbed the heavy blows. But looking at him, Johnson wondered just how uncomfortably warm he had gotten under his suit. Those Forerunner weapons looked to burn at an extremely high temperature. Never thought I'd be saving you for once.
We're even, as long as we're only counting today.
Johnson chuckled at that. He had just spoken the same words he did when the Spartan had saved him from a brute chieftain's makeshift prison cell back on Earth. Smart ass. I hate to break this up, but we really shouldn't be waiting around. The flood is spreading pretty fast in this ring, and I've seen them take over a planet-sized ship. The three turned and began walking towards the terminal at the end of the hall. Cortana was right. She had been trapped on High Charity when it was overrun by the flood. Luckily enough, she had the Master Chief to rescue her. Johnson wondered just what exactly she had seen in there. Most likely vital and horrifying intel. Be ready to run. When you light this candle, it's going to make one hell of a bang. Chief nodded, placing Cortana on the control room's computer. She hopped over. Her blue avatar projected herself on the big hologram in front of them. I have the index in place. The activation sequence is ready. Say the word when you're ready, Chief. The Spartan looked around the large, empty room before landing his sight back on Cortana.
Do it.
Johnson was shaken from his little flashback as the Arbiter fired a cannonade of armour-piercing rounds from the Warthog's chain gun. It sputtered out flashes of lead, peppering infection forms that pursued the Warthog from its starboard side. The elite must have had hands-on training with such human weaponry. Avery had noted at just how remarkable he was with such munition. It would be alarming if it wasn't for the large alien now being on his side. Gun it, Chief, floor it, right into the hangar. The Warthog lost traction beneath its tyres as it flew through the air, launching off the Forerunner plates directly into the forward Unto Dawn's loading bay. The landing was bound to be rough. The Warthog made contact. hitting the metal floor hard. The vehicle flipped and scraped, trailing sparks as the three were flung from the open roof. Johnson rubbed his bruised head. He definitely wished he wore a helmet now. Chief recovered sooner and ran to a terminal, plugging Cortana into the ship's controls. The Dawn's thrusters immediately engaged, launching itself in a trajectory towards the portal that would lead back to Earth. The Arbiter reached out his long, four-fingered hand, pulling him to his feet with little effort. The Elite had already shown such strength before, during their first encounter. It was strange being helped rather than restrained by an Elite. That was the wrong word now. The race was a species, not a class in the Covenant ranks. If only he could remember their true names. Gravity was slowly beginning to affect the hangar, and boxes of munitions slid across the floor towards the open bay. Arbiter and Johnson ran before they could be caught on the underside of a rolling Scorpion tank, only managing to escape its tonnage by the skin of their teeth as they both narrowly made it through a doorway. They were now temporarily blocked off from the Master Chief, and their only hope of survival was to find somewhere airtight and quick. As the dawn rose, it turned at a 90-degree angle away from the Ark's surface, and the Master Chief was forced to dig down in the hangar, eventually pinning himself against the terminal. In here, Johnson shouted over to the Arbiter as they raced into the bridge. The portal leading back to Earth was in sight, demanding attention with its inky maw in centre view of the bridge. Hold on tight. Johnson sat on the closest chair he could find and buckled himself in. Arbiter observed and did the same, his large frame overlapping the top of the backrest. Looking through the viewport, it was hard to tell if they were far or close to the wormhole. It was incomprehensibly large, and the ship was insignificant compared to it. In a flash, their sights were blinded by whiteness as the ship made it through the portal. Earth was back in view. Johnson felt like cheering, wanting to scream at the top of his lungs. He never thought he'd make it back. A horrendous tearing sound followed shortly after entry, like the sound of flesh and bone being ripped apart, only more metallic. He couldn't quite describe it to himself, but he didn't need to. After quickly checking the monitors on the bridge, the portal had closed on them, and only half of the ship had managed to make it. Its rear engines were now completely missing. Alerts followed on screen, accompanied by the sound of sirens and red warning lights lighting up the bridge.
What is it?
Johnson looked at him, the Arbiter's mandibles slightly agape. We lost something. Admiral Hood stood atop a stage, his uniform clean and fresh, and his hat by his chest.
For us, the storm has passed. The war is over. Let us never forget those who journey into the hole in dark and did no return.
Johnson stood beside the Arbiter. He too was in uniform, clean, white, and heavily decorated in medals. It was strange being in a ceremonial uniform and knowing that he didn't have to go back and change into his military drab. He had a choice now, and the future that lied ahead of him was still uncertain. The decision was overwhelming and difficult.
Their decision required courage beyond measure, sacrifice, and unshakable conviction that their fight, our fight, was elsewhere.
Staying in the military no doubt would be a familiar life, but maybe it was time to relax and find someone to settle down with. He was certainly past retirement age. The Orion augmentations had been far more effective than anticipated, and he wondered what other surprises it could potentially reveal.
As we start to rebuild, this hillside will remain barren, a memorial to heroes fallen. They ennoble all of us, and they shall not be forgotten.
Out of all the people who came back, he expected that the Master Chief would have been before him. He half expected to see him fall out of the sky and land right in this memorial. but maybe his luck had finally run out. Lord Hood saluted. If he wasn't quick enough through the dawn, it could have been his picture on that memorial. 3 gunshots rang out over the valley as a group of Marines fired, completing the ceremony. Lord Hood approached the two. Johnson saluted.
Just tell me one thing. Did you see him fall? Did you watch him die?
Johnson looked up at the Arbiter. He did the same. Unsure of what to really say, but certain of the answer. No, sir. The Admiral smirked slightly and looked up at the sun-kissed sky.
Well then, remember one thing, Sergeant Major.
He placed his hand on Johnson's shoulder.
Spartans never die.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like in hopes that the algorithm gods will pick it up and share it for everyone else who loves Halo. If you're new to the channel, then subscribing would be a great idea to keep up with all the latest videos released weekly. And if you have anything to say about the video or just want to say hi, then the comment section is the place for you. Shout out to my loyal patron, that is Corporal Hot Pockets. Your donation is greatly appreciated and assists the channel growing in more technical means. If you want to see your name in the video, go visit my Patreon, links in the description. And if you want to speak to me or other Halo fans alike, then join the Reclaimer Gaming Discord server. We'd love to have you on board. Anyway, that's it for today. Peace.